name's James Smith. I joined the Australian Army in 2007 as an infantry soldier. I was posted to the 6th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment in Brisbane. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. I was wounded in action in Afghanistan, lost 6 friends whilst I was deployed. In 2012 I lost another mate that was killed in action in Afghanistan, and changed course to become a combat medic in 2015, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety and depression in 2017 and slowly transitioned out of the military. I'm now a civilian, and this is my interview with the Navy diver. I grew up in Bacchus Marsh in Victoria. It's just west of Melbourne in a sort of semi-rural town. I had a pretty normal childhood. I'd say played a lot of football, and I'm more focused on drama and music, to be honest, and not so much military sort of stuff. And yeah, when I wasn't a great student in school. I did go till year 12. However, year 12 was a pretty good year for me. I didn't do much studying, and I was 18, so it was yeah, it wasn't a smart choice, but it was quite fun. And when I finished school, my dream was to actually become an actor. So military didn't really even come up. And I realized how difficult it would be to become an actor, and how most actors don't have jobs. So I decided then that I might join the army and follow in my brother's footsteps, and yeah, so I went from school and worked on a pig farm actually for a while, and then eventually joined the army as an infantry soldier. When I was still in school, I drove up from Melbourne to Singleton, and I saw my brother do his march out parade at the School of Infantry, and that was my first ever experience with the military at all. And they showed us what they got to do. They showed us some weapons, and my brother told me about it, and from there, that's sort of where my aspirations to join the military came from. Yeah, so from there I went home and made a plan and applied and went and did my Joe's Day, which is what it was called back then, to join the army. And yeah, it went from there. So I think my older brother was a big inspiration to join the army. When I went through my recruiting process, they were driving artillery positions at me, and I actually rang my brother and said, should I become a gun number, which is someone that puts the bombs in the big guns, the artillery guns. And he laughed at me, and he said, if you're going to join the army, just join infantry, don't be an idiot. So essentially that's what I did, and yeah, the rest is history. 5th of June was I'll start again actually. When I first applied to join the infantry, I was rejected because I was still in year 12 at the time, and the recruiter said, I can't take you from school, you need to make a decision to leave school and join, or stay in school and maybe become an officer. And I took it as just a rejection, so I went on with my life and was working at a farm. And yeah, and then as soon as I finished school, the recruiter called me back and said, do you still want to join? And I said yes, and he said, okay, 6 months, your recruit day is, and that was the 5th of June 2007. So that day came, and I hopped on the bus in Melbourne and took a bus to Kapuka and started my training. So it was 3 months in Kapuka, and which was it was tough for me, to be honest. I look back on it now, and it's quite easy and it's only 3 months. But at the time, you go from a civilian to Kapuka, and I didn't like being yelled at, and so I took it to heart. But 3 months went by pretty quickly. Finished the march out, and then I hopped on another bus and ended up in Singleton. And at the time, they didn't have, they weren't starting a course. They weren't starting a platoon through a course. So I was in a holding platoon for a few weeks, and then they decided to run a course in Brisbane, and I put my hand up for it. So I hopped on another bus, ended up in Brisbane, did my initial employment training, so my infantry training at the 6th Battalion, and then went from that course, that was 3 months, and went from that course straight into the 6th Battalion, and that's where I started. It was the beginning of 2008. I started my first posting, and that was with the 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. I went from my IET course, it finished mid-December, and I went straight on my Christmas leave, which I think was 2 weeks at the time, and then came back at the start of January, and I was put in Charlie Company 6 RAR, and at the time it was very full on. You think that your training is the difficult part, the Kapuka and the Singleton and IET training. But once I got to the unit and you're actually doing the job every single day, you quickly realise that the job's actually more difficult than doing your IETs. However, you get nights off and you get weekends to enjoy yourself. So I felt a bit, I felt overwhelmed, to be honest, because as soon as I got there, it was pack your packs, and we went out to Canungra, and we did more days outfield that year than we did on base or at home, which was pretty crazy for me at the time. But it established a camaraderie within the company. One of the bad things was most of my IET course, the platoon went into the same company, so we were known as the lead company at that year. So we copped a lot of flack from the other companies in the battalion. But you know, you deal with it and you move on. So if you weren't outfield, it was you parade first thing in the morning at 7:30, and you conduct your PT, your physical training, for an hour or so, and then you have breakfast, and then you start work at 9:30. And work could be anything. For an infantry soldier, it's difficult because your job is to be in the field, essentially. So on base, it's a lot of mundane tasks, a lot of admin sort of stuff, getting things prepared for field or war. So it was pretty mundane, some of the stuff that you had to do, and on top of that, you know, you got guard duties as well, and studying for specialist courses. So it was the day-to-day tasks, to be honest, were pretty painful until you went outfield, and then you actually did the job. So that was quite good. In the field, you know, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're in a tactical environment. But you're all doing it together, so that was a good part about being in the field with the guys beside you. You're all in it together, so that was good.
Team spirit.
Team, yeah. Go team. I was deployed to Afghanistan in January 2010. The lead-up training was different to the job. So the lead-up training, we were told we would be in vehicles. We trained to be in vehicles. And then obviously the situation always changes. We got to Afghanistan and we did our 2 weeks of essentially acclimatization to the country, and you're fixing your weapons and getting your sights ready. And then after 2 weeks, we ended up in the Mirabad Valley, which was east of Tarankow. And we went straight to a house called Platoon House Exchange. That was an old mud brick house that a Talib a Taliban owned, and then was pushed off and ended up in Pakistan, and 1RAR took it over and fortified it, essentially built a couple of towers, and it became a platoon house or a patrol house. We got over there, it would have been mid-February, and we moved into platoon house exchange, and 1RAR moved out. That was pretty full on, because we trained for vehicles, and then as soon as we get into country, we essentially said goodbye to the vehicles. For 3 months we didn't see them, and it was all foot patrols. And the first patrol I ever went on foot, there was intelligence that there was an IED placed in the field at the front of Platoon House Exchange, and we stepped off. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I remember going in. It was probably autumn at the time. Winter was just sort of coming to a close. Still very cold, but everything was quite green and luscious. And I remember patrolling into the green zone, and I took a knee next to an aqueduct, which is just a little water source. And I remember seeing kids jumping around and playing and kicking balls, and people were out walking around, and it was a bit surreal to me. It was I just thought to myself how beautiful this is, and like I'll admit I probably wasn't doing my job the best that I could have been doing. It was really overwhelming, like what was happening and how beautiful this country was, and how could this be dangerous, and it was that moment behind me, about 50 or 60 meters, I think, an IED. I turned around and saw the engineers walking across the field, and it was at that point an IED blew up, and one of the engineers went flying through the air, and it really took me back to reality, that I'm in a war zone and people are trying to kill me. and I explained that IED, that one that went off. The way I think about it was like God just struck the earth with his finger as hard as he could, and the ground lifted and threw dirt and everything in the air, and this engineer went flying. He was physically unharmed. I think he lost some hearing, but the IED was placed in the ground pretty deep, so the shrapnel and fragmentation didn't get anyone. But that was my very first patrol in Afghanistan, and I think it was good, because it brought my guard back up and made me quickly realise where I was and what I need to do to stay alive.